Hello there, and welcome to Weird Music on the Glumberger channel. So, in today's episode, we're going to be discussing a bit of a difficult track, basically. The story behind this composition essentially deals with hate crime against the LGBT community. So do proceed with caution if that's a particular trigger for you. I'm going to just say now. What we have here is perhaps one of the most darkest and most foreboding tracks under the Pinkcourtesyphone moniker. 15 minutes of depressingly haunting ambient drones that pull you within this very bleak landscape in construction of a very mournful eulogy, essentially. It's a very difficult one for me to listen to, but it's odd, as difficult as it is. This is perhaps one of my favourite compositions that's come from the Pinkcourtesyphone moniker. As I just found myself very enamoured, with the way the music just pulls on my emotions and carries me through this story, and just this sense of understanding of something so horrible, essentially. Without further ado, I present Under Chandeliers by Pinkcourtesyphone. So, a very brief rundown of who Pinkcourtesyphone is. This is, of course, the sort of ambient sound art moniker for Richard Chartier, of course, isn't it? But what is Under Chandeliers, then? Well, this is a single 15-minute composition that was released on June 12th, 2016, the morning following one of the largest mass shootings in US history on the Pulse nightclub in Orlando, Florida. A horrific act of terrorist hate crime, essentially. To further discuss this, Chartier includes the following in the bandcamp liner notes. June 12th, 2016. My heart sank this morning, waking up to the news of the appalling, senseless and brutal hate crime against members of the LGBTQ community in Orlando, Florida at the Pulse nightclub. This is the largest mass shooting in US history, and it's shameful. I have been working on this piece for a while, but it always felt so dark. Darkness is what I feel today. This work is dedicated to the victims of all violence against LGBTQ people. Thank you to all those who have donated. May love prevail over hate in all its forms. Richard Chartier. So given the statement, of course, we can understand what it is we're hearing there. It's interesting for me in a lot of ways. Pinkcourtesyphone as a discography is this very ethereal, gloopy, ambient drone, essentially, just covered in these pink swaths constantly in the music and the aesthetic. But there's none of that sort of romanticism here or that joy. Everything is incredibly grayscale, which is why it ends up being one of the most difficult tracks within the whole discography, I feel. I think this is perhaps one of those things where the context behind something, which in this case is even attributed even after the fact it was all composed, it ends up creating so much of the mood and feelings of the piece itself. Although Chartier worked on this for quite a while before this senseless shooting took place, it was only after the fact did it suddenly seem to have the context necessary for it to be released. It's kind of almost reminiscent of the disintegration loops, which did coincidentally ended up becoming intertwined with the 9/11 attacks on the World Trade Center, of course. The context attached to the release ends up contributing so much to the feeling that the music offers, I would say. It makes it all a very difficult listen as a result, though. But even within that, it actually lies the power of music itself, something that is able to carry your emotions so heavily, even though it's so dark and foreboding. To discuss the track itself, though, from the immediate onset, you have this rather intense low-end rumbling, filling the scene with this rather intense sense of dread, a dark moodiness evident in the particulars of the tones being achieved. And there's almost the faintest form of a melody being formed in amongst that dark miasma being presented here. A small collapse of a few stretched out ones, perhaps, attempting to rise up from the crumbling decay of debris, only to collapse beneath the immense weight of trying to carry itself. And as it progresses, you do end up with some lighter, fainter versions of that melody accompanying alongside it, almost like a faint remnant of what it all once was, a mirror image perhaps, of what it had managed to be, offset by the extreme darkness of what it currently is. And from there it kind of navigates towards the main crux of the song, accompanied only by the incredibly distant tapping of some kind of echo situated right in the background and well out of sight, but still visibly there as it all occurs in a weird way. With the combination of this and the drones attempting to just climb up before falling all back down, mixing in amongst one another, it forms the main body of the composition that carries itself along for 15 minutes, and it all feels so distinctly dark and foreboding as a result. It's amazing because there's something so beautifully and achingly just powerful about it all as it builds this larger picture, still obscured by the murky, foggy layers that is actually prevalent in a lot of Pinkcourtesysophone's music. But with that context, there's something that comes across as a bit of a gut punch when hearing this, especially in consideration to why the track was released, as we mentioned. The way it sounds really tugs on you when you hear it, but the context is what gives it that understanding. But you really kind of just get the sense of darkness that Chartier was probably feeling when working on this particular piece, but also what he was feeling on the morning of the attack, essentially. As there's no highs or moments of ecstatic ecstasy here, just instead this pure mourning in the form of this minimalist droning composition. When it comes to the work of Pinkcourtesyphone, there is a lot of darkness a lot of the time, no more often than not. But you actually do get a sort of sense of humour and wiry playfulness embedded in the murky lowercase drones. But here, we just only have that darkness, enveloping us like a blanket as we find our minds coming to the realization of just how horrible things are, how evil the world can be, and how hatred can fuel such heinous, unexplainable acts of violence. Whenever I listen to the particular track, the context always comes to mind, and it just floors me, and I find myself just hanging my head so low as the drones just pull you in and around that incredibly dark, depressing landscape. But in consideration to what Chartier is trying to reference here, it makes sense. You understand the incredibly dark nature of the recording purely as a result of how it's all sounding, which expertly pulls you into that world. It's weird because for me, this is one of my favourite Pinkcourtesyphone tracks, but it's not one I can easily listen to. And there's just something so devastating about it that makes it difficult to approach even at the best of times. Each and every time I do listen to this one, I find myself completely pulled by the tragic experience that it's all presenting. And for the 15 minutes of duration, I am actually genuinely at loss for words, unable to really do anything as I find myself just dragged into those dark, foreboding thoughts. Especially towards the end of it, after having just been carried around in this environment for 15 minutes, I just feel like I'm bordering on just crying almost. And it's weird, because as mentioned, it is one of my favourite compositions under the Pinkcourtesyphone moniker, but the sheer, and I think it's the fact that it carries my emotions in this way is why I adore it, even though it's so difficult to listen to. It's difficult to explain, but it might be something to do with sort of the cathartic release that music can offer, basically, or just how something so abstract can end up just pulling you in such an intense way. Difficult to explain, but it always is very difficult to explain, truth be told. But yeah, it is so much in part to the story behind what fueled the release. It's one that fills me with this sense of rage and anger of just how senseless and full of hatred it all was, essentially. I'm filled with such a sense of sadness that hatred can lead to such horrible things happening. And looking into it, the Pulse nightclub shooting remains in America one of the deadliest terrorist attacks, with the murder of 49 people. 49 people celebrating the LGBT community, living their lives, being themselves, just expressing love in this environment, and then just gunned down. Apparently, it's one of the deadliest incidences of violence against the LGBT community in American history. And as someone from that community, I can see why Chartier felt so broken by the news, so pushed to do something during a time when he must have felt so helpless and unable to do anything at all. And of the morning following the attack, Chartier released this very track, and what I think is truly beautiful about it in a weird way is how all of the proceeds that the track raised were donated to the Pulse Tragedy Community Fund, which seemed, from looking at it, to raise over $1,000 in just a few days. Since the fund is no longer accepting donations, Chartier has now redirected donations to the American Civil Liberties Union, and still continuing to donate any money given to this particular track. And as heartbreakingly tragic as it all is, I admire Chartier's effort in the name of civil rights, of using his platform to try and help in a way that he can. It all adds such a perspective and context onto this particular recording that makes it incredibly impactful and powerful one to hear, basically. And listening to it, of course, you do get surrounded in that darkness that it's all opting for, referential to the tragic senseless attack. But what I think is actually very fascinating is beyond all of that, and even embedded into the bandcamp liner notes as well, is actually a message of love and solidarity that, something that is actually saying, although this is horrible, we need to actually come together in the name of love. Above all else, in Chartier's own words, as he said, may love prevail over hate in all its forms. And so I do think with that we will end today's episode of Weird Music. It's a bit of an odd one to have done, just a singular track from the Pink Courtesy moniker, but I have actually wanted to discuss this particular composition for some time, as, like I said, it is one of my favourite things I've heard from Chartier, even though I can only listen to it seldomly. The way in which it imparts this incredibly dark and depressing atmosphere across this 15-minute runtime in tribute to something so horrible is truly spectacular, and I think it is without a doubt one of the most powerful statements in all of Chartier's career, as both a solo performer under his own name and as Pinkcourtesyphone. You have, admittedly, the sort of, flamboyant excess that contributes to the Pinkcourtesyphone identity is largely missing on this one. But in context of everything, it actually makes sense of what's happened though. You've got none of that woozy, intoxicated warmth, just this eulogy to the fallen, the lives so horribly taken by senseless violence. And I think it is beautiful for that though. It is a truly powerful track, and something that you should go and support, essentially, if it's something that you think you can own in your Bandcamp collection, perhaps, if that makes sense. So as Chartier says, may love prevail over hate in all of its forms. So keep love in your heart. With that, I wish you all the best. Take care, and bye-bye for now.